In case you're one of those people brand new watching the show, feeling all alone, hunkered in your basement, wondering, can you go out and breathe the air? Just know you are not alone. And it's not just America, it's all around the world, and especially take a look at what is going down in Europe.
Unsere Forderung ist zurück zur Demokratie, weg mit den Gesetzen, die uns einengen, weg mit der Maske, die uns zu Sklaven macht.
Wir sind heute hier, weil auf der ganzen Welt nur noch wenige Wissenschaftler, die regierungstreu berichten, gehört werden. Es gibt Tausende, Abertausende Wissenschaftler, Ärzte weltweit, die werden nicht gehört, die werden mundtot gemacht, die werden zensiert oder als Verschwörungstheoretiker diskreditiert, obwohl sie ganze Universitäten geleitet haben. Dagegen protestiere ich. Ich möchte den Konsens, der früher möglich war und jetzt nicht mehr erlaubt zu sein scheint.
Take off your mask! Take off your mask! Take off your mask! Today
is not about waking up, it's asking the awakened to stand up!
Hands off our children! Hands off our children! Hands off our children! Hands off our children!
Today I'm here speaking in front of all of you for my children, because I refuse to tell them in 20 years' time that I did nothing to save their human rights.
I've got Ellie Gray, who's one of the great speakers in the middle of that montage you just saw, joining me now.
But then the last couple of months, I have been completely inundated with people messaging me saying they feel the same, their friends and family feel the same. What can we do about it? Because there's only so much that Facebook and Instagram and social media will allow you to share. I'm currently serving a 30-day ban on social media for spreading harmful misinformation, even though everything that I quote, I source the government in. So I get all my information from the government or from government statistic websites. Right. So I thought, right, we're being censored now. It's time to actually do something and make some noise. Be that inconvenience. Make sure that we are seen. Make sure that we are heard. And there are thousands and thousands of other people who are as frustrated as I am. So that's why I thought it's time to do something.
What do you think is at the heart of it? What's making the difference now?
So I think the government have completely messed up. I mean, the final straw that I feel in the UK was the mandating of masks. Even people who have been supportive of the government's choices this whole time are going, well, if it's for our best interests, why are they doing this 5 months down the line? And they would have, I mean, if you look back to news articles from March and April and even May and June, they were saying that the science does not support the wearing of masks for the public. And even now, no governing body recommends masks to stop the spread of coronavirus. So they told people this, and they were really adamant about this in the beginning. And now suddenly it's all changed, and people are going, well, it doesn't make sense. And when things don't make sense for a human, you look deeper.
Now, you have 3 children yourself. How much does being a mother weigh into this for you and your commitment to the work that you're doing?
Massively. They are the driving force for me. That, like I said in my speech, there's no way that I can say to them in 10, 15, 20 years' time that I did nothing, that I just sat behind my screen and shared a few posts. That's not enough for me, because in 20 years' time, as adults, they could be forced to wear masks just to go outside. They could be forced to vaccinate, against their will. It's so much worse, and I can't tell them that I did absolutely nothing to stop it. I need them to know that I went down fighting, and even then, I won't give up. Everyone talks about the new normal. I don't want the new normal. We deserve the right to live life as we knew it. We don't want to be forced to vaccinate our children with poisons. We don't want to be forced to wear masks. We have the right to breathe oxygen. We have the right to go and see our friends and family. We have the right to live our life without a government or a pharmaceutical company dictating what we can and can't do, who we can and can't see, if we can or can't go to work. They've now made it that 60% of the UK are relying on the government for their income. I mean, that's only going to go one way and it's not good.
It's that time. It's time for the Jackson Report. All right, Jeffrey, what do you got for us this week?
Well, wait till I see what I have for you this week. Forbes, let's go back to Forbes. We got a good one this time. Forbes headline, we should consider starting COVID-19 vaccinations now. This was written by Steven Salzberg. He's a distinguished professor at Johns Hopkins University, undergrad, master's at Yale, PhD at Harvard, 250 scientific papers. And he writes, quote, "The evidence for these trial vaccines is already better than for most of the actual treatments we're giving people. And most importantly, we know they are safe. So let's start vaccinating millions of people now as soon as we can ramp up production." Days later, after the public called him out, he writes, "I was wrong. We can't skip phase 3 vaccine trials."
No,
and he
Steven.
writes, this is his quote, "I was wrong. After reading many of the responses to my article, some of them outlining the risks in greater detail, I've concluded that 1, the risks are greater than I presented them, and 2, the benefits are not as great as I had thought." Spoken like a true AstroTurf term anti-vaxxer, Stephen. Before the coronavirus, that would have got you censored speaking like that or writing like that. But now, thank you for not just going on and refusing to address that. But what's interesting about this is last week we covered Forbes told their readers to not do their own research. This was a headline we covered. When it comes to science, no doubt. So, looking at that headline, naturally, where would you turn? You would turn to Forbes for a professor at Johns Hopkins University, from Harvard, a doctorate. Surely he would have some answers, but he's wrong.
It's amazing, right? 1 week you have this article that says you're basically too stupid to understand all the details of these vaccine programs, so stop trying. Don't do the research. In fact, you should just trust guys like Steven Salzberg. We bring in Harvard professionals to make sure that you have the correct approach and data. He posts a headline, "Get out there and grab this vaccine as soon as you can." Oh, wait a minute, whoops. Why? Why the change, right? Did he come under, was it visible that people were attacking him?
Yeah, he said, in his article, he said, after replies to my article. So let's look at some of those replies. I went to Twitter. I pulled a couple of them off. We have Dr. Faraz's reply. He says, "With all due respect, genuinely and not rhetorically, this is not your field of expertise. Writing something that strays this far from vaccine norms when you're not a recognized expert in the field is irresponsible." Then we go to someone named Kim Masters. She wrote to him, "Hey, thalidomide was fun."
Right.
And then finally, we have a guy named Kevin McKernans. He writes, quote, "Man who critiques HCQ as being untested suggests everyone else use even less tested medicine. Pharma, bro." Okay, let's go to Moderna. So Moderna has been bouncing around in these headlines all over the place, not only for us, but
this is the number one choice for America's COVID-19 vaccine, Moderna. AstraZeneca, obviously the number one contender in England. So what's going on with Moderna?
Yeah, so let's look at some numbers here. They announced recently that they received another $472 million from the government. So they received $483 million in April for their early stage trials. And then in late July, they're given another $472 million. That's basically about $955 million contract from BARDA. Excuse me. That's the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. It's under HHS.
Wow.
Now, again, this is a company without a successul commercial drug, really not good phase 3 data yet.
And they've been around for more than a decade now, right? They've been failing for, I think, nearly 2 decades. And so, but let's just go ahead and give them hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion or $2 to make this vaccine. So why is that important?
Right. So, yes. So setting up this story further. So in May, the company announced the decision to raise over $1 billion in a public stock offering. So what was happening in the last 6 months for Moderna was you had some insider trading. Now we'll go over that legal, but still questionable insider trading. Now, as everyone knows, in the last 6 months, Moderna was tapped for the U.S. vaccine candidate, as you said. They've released their press releases showing the trials. And now we have a list. I put together a quick list of some of their top execs. So we have Stefan Bancel. He's the chief executive officer of Moderna. Now in April, the media reported that he became a billionaire for the first time. He offloaded over $31 million in shares over the last 6 months. Stephen Hodge, president, over $10 million. Elizabeth Nabel, now she's a now former member of Moderna's board of directors. We're going to get into her further in a moment. $8.4 million. Tal Zaks, chief medical officer, $56 million. He currently owns 0 shares. That's your chief medical officer.
Fully
Moderna.
cashed out. We talked about that before. Everything in sight. He's the chief medical officer, so he would know how good this vaccine is going to be, and he doesn't want to have 1 red cent invested when this thing hits the market in what could be a $750 billion boom should this be a good product. He didn't want any part of that. He decided to get out now. Curious, very curious. All right, who else is on this list?
Yep, we have Juan Anders. He's the chief technical operations and quality officer, over $12 million offloaded in the last 6 months. Shares, he currently owns 0 shares. Lawrence Kim, he has left the company since, but he is the chief financial officer, $66 million shares. Lori Henderson, general counsel and corporate secretary, she received $8.5 million of selling her shares. As a company, Moderna in the last 6 months has sold over $262 million in shares. Now, really quickly for some balance on this story, these executives were using what's called a 10b5-1 form for insider trading. So what this is it's for people in their positions that have what are called to possess a material non-public information. So just basically information that's not public. So what they do is they create a written plan to buy or sell stocks. In this case, clearly it was a sell when they're not in possession of that information. Now, it's not for me to say when or how they were in possession of information, or did they have that before they created this plan, but you can see in the last 6 months, there's been a lot of activity. And even the SEC chairman, his name is Jake Clayton, he was on CNBC, he came out and he said, look, there's a lot of uncertainty right now. Corporations should really practice good corporate hygiene. And why would you want to even bring attention to yourself at this time? So he was warning people in April on an interview to just relax. You don't want to really bring a lot of attention.
Honestly, Jeffrey, does it matter whether it's legal or not? I mean, I don't care if it's legal. Is it ethical? Or even more, what does it say about your company? I mean, I feel like if you were, sold on the Titanic, you got to get your ticket on the Titanic. It's this gorgeous, beautiful ship. And, you get on there and the captain, whoever, shouts as you raise your champagne glass and says, not even God could sink this ship. And whoever's like, woohoo, this is going to be awesome. And then you slowly watch these lifeboats going over the side with the captain of the ship, the chief officer, everybody that built the ship is getting off the ship as you start sailing out to sea. I mean, that's what's happening here. Look at that, $262 million these people have cashed out, essentially jumping into yachts and leaving the rest of those believing in this vaccine on what I have to imagine is just a Titanic. It's outrageous.
And you mentioned ethics there. You mentioned conflicts of interest. So let's go back to one of their now former board of directors. Her name is Elizabeth Nabel. Now, this is a headline out of the Boston Globe, who did the reporting on this. Brigham president resigns from Moderna board after conflicts of interest questions raised. So after the Boston Globe inquired about whether her position at Brigham Health and its Brigham and Women's Hospital raised a conflict of interest because the hospital was chosen as one of the sites for the phase 3 Moderna trial, she resigned. So this was after the Boston Globe asked her about it. She resigned. Not before they chose her hospital for the testing site, not when they put out a press release. And here is the press release. This is from July 27th. Brigham takes on leadership role in COVID-19 vaccine trials, one of the sites for Moderna's phase 3 COVID vaccine trial. She didn't resign then. She resigned after the Boston Globe talked to her about it.
After she's cashed in. Can we see that card with all of the people that cashed in? How much did she ultimately? So there she is, Elizabeth Nabel, $8,477,000 she cashed in. And now she's honorably stepping down because there's ethics questions. This is ridiculous, Jeffrey. This is ridiculous. I don't want you to step down from Moderna, Elizabeth. I want you to step out of this hospital and away from this trial. You've cashed in $8,477,000. You have a conflict of interest, not with Moderna. Hang out there as long as you want. You're not allowed to be in the room where these trials are taking place. That's the ethical problem. This is outrageous, like the opposite of what you wanted to do. No, 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 no. You don't resign from the company you just cashed in on. You resign from the trials that you could manipulate to make Moderna look good. Honestly, I think that if there's one thing, we didn't think to do this until now, but everybody, I would say look up this hospital, go ahead and call in right now and say, I absolutely will not trust a vaccine study that comes out of this hospital if someone that cashed in $8 million, we're talking about Elizabeth Nabel, I want her off that trial, I want her out of the hospital. That conflict of interest undermines our faith in the vaccine. That'll be a call to action right now. It's a little bit off the hip, but I can't stand stuff like this, and we can make a difference. So everybody, light up that hospital and let them know, you know what, we're glad you're doing the trial. We are disgusted that Elizabeth Nabel even works there. She could manipulate it. We don't trust it. Get her out of there. She's made enough money, by the way. Elizabeth, I'm sorry, but I think you can live on the $8,400,000. Go back to Moderna. They'll probably give you a ton more money anyway. Outrageous.
What's interesting on this, too, a final point is the mainstream reporting didn't quite hit on what you just hit on. Of course, typically they don't really do that too much. But what they did hit on was in May, she sold her first kind of tranche of shares for almost $2 million. A month after that, she announced, or not her, but her hospital announced that they would be cutting exec pay, wages, suspending retirement, and freezing pay of some of their employees because the hospital has had such a windfall of loss of money due to it shutting down because of the COVID crisis. So really, I mean, she's cashing out on these Moderna stocks, and the wages are frozen for a lot of those employees as well as their retirement. So that's an interesting, it's not illegal, but it speaks to another ethical data point on that piece.
But we are at a place where literally a word, the name of a product that is in all of our vernacular, is being made illegal on social media platforms. I am not allowed to say the word hydroxychloroquine. Well, there it is. I've said it. If Facebook takes us down, it's because apparently discussing that word, that drug that has been deemed safe for 65 years is putting Americans at risk. It couldn't be putting them on a ventilator with no other approach in sight and killing 9 out of 10 of them. No, discussing a drug that, by the way, you can't even get your hands on unless you talk to your doctor, because we don't get it over the counter here. We have got to have a prescription. So I don't even see how we are putting anyone at risk. But I will not have words be illegal in the United States of America. So today, if we lose Facebook, so be it. Every one of you, if you're on Facebook, at least do me this favor. Will you hop over to the HighWire.com just for a couple seconds right now, sign our email list, just give us your email. It's totally encrypted. No one else will ever have it. The only reason we want it is so that we can tell you where to find us when one of the platforms you're watching us on decides that using a word in the English dictionary is illegal and should be burned. I refuse to live in that place, and if that is where we really are, here in the United States of America, may God help us all.
My next guest is a doctor and state senator in Minnesota who is deeply troubled by the CDC's latest guidance for counting COVID deaths. Dr. Scott Jensen joins me now.
I spent some time earlier today just going through the CDC's manual on how to complete death certificates and the parts that were specifically written for physicians. The idea that we're going to allow people to massage and sort of game the numbers is a real issue.
And if you start looking at the actual numbers of how dollars come into this, when someone adds a diagnosis to a death certificate or a hospital discharge summary, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing anything wrong. But if a typical garden variety pneumonia without complications for a Medicare patient will be about $5,000. If you have COVID-19 pneumonia, it's about $13,000.
Wow.
And if you use a ventilator, it's $39,000. And these numbers come straight from CMS. Right there they are.
Wow, look at that.
The Chaska Republican admits he's a burr in the saddle to those in charge of Minnesota's COVID response. Now he's certain his opinions have put him on the radar of the state medical board.
I was notified by the Board of Medical Practice in Minnesota that I was being investigated. So I'm in the position where I have to explain that I wasn't spreading misinformation. I've got an 8-page document that I put together for the Board of Medical Practice. I also have some 70 pages of attachments. Folks, do I feel targeted? Yeah, I do.
Do you think maybe you overstepped by comparing flu to coronavirus and the rates of death and how the virus spread?
I do not. I cannot help but be reminded of the movie in Forrest Gump where I think Forrest says, stupid is as stupid does. And that's what's going on here. Quite frankly, what do you want me to do? You want me to compare COVID-19 to syphilis or gonorrhea or tuberculosis or HIV or Ebola? I mean, come on. It's a single-stranded RNA virus. The symptoms of presentation are similar. The incubation periods might be somewhat different. The latency periods are still present for both. These are comparable. Dr. Fauci said in the New England Journal of Medicine that the COVID-19 disease is acting very much like an influenza outbreak. The bottom line is, whoever did submit the complaints against me, I think they picked the wrong guy. I can be a pit bull. I am a skeptic. I do a lot of reading, and I'm not backing off.
Amazing, right? I mean, not only is Scott Jensen a doctor, a practicing physician, who, by the way, I think was General Doctor, Family Doctor of the Year just a couple of years ago up in Minnesota. He's also a sitting senator, so he's involved in politics. The idea that someone like Scott Jensen, who is that qualified in so many different places, could come under attack certainly meant anybody could come under attack. Well, the medical board responded, and they have finally come with their judgment. I had an opportunity to sit down yesterday in the middle of Senator Scott Jensen's incredibly busy schedule. Here is the short interview that took place yesterday. Take a look at this. Dr. Scott Jensen, you were just on our show a couple of weeks ago, and at that moment, you were under review by the medical board for 2 issues. One, that you had made a comparison between the SARS-CoV-2 and flu, and also that you had discussed death certificates and that the new way that doctors were supposed to fill out death certificates could bloat the amount of people that died of COVID-19 when maybe it was really from other comorbidities. You have since been before the medical board. So what's the update? What's happened since we last spoke with you?
Well, thank you, Del. On Monday, a couple of weeks ago, I received an email from the Board of Medical Practice indicating that they had completed their investigation and that they had dismissed both allegations. And in that email, they indicated I would be receiving an official letter, which I received a couple days ago. And basically, they did a thorough review of the situation. They looked at my response, and they dismissed both charges outright. And they never asked me to come down for an in-person meeting. I was gratified. Obviously, it was a burden on my shoulders. It feels like a weight being lifted. I had to just yesterday re-credential at one of the hospitals I have patients at. And while I was running through the credentialing process, one of the questions was, have you been investigated by the Board of Medical Practice in the last 3 years? And I have to confess, I flinched because nobody likes to have to answer yes to any of these questions, but
right.
It is what it is. So I said yes, and I explained the situation.
So now, is your response to the medical board, is that something that's public? Or are we able to see it? Or does that have to remain private in the files?
It does not have to remain private. And I do have the opportunity to make my response public. The actual correspondence I received from the Board of Medical Practice was pretty scant. It was initially a 2-page letter announcing that I was being investigated. And then the letter I received a couple of days ago was a 1-page letter saying that the allegations had been dismissed. Perhaps the important document, though, was my 8-page response letter and 70 pages of attachments. And I did not want to release that to the public until I had received the official letter from the Board of Medical Practice. But now that I've received that, my intention is to release to the public my response along with the attachments. We now have a fracture among physicians. We've got physicians who are tearing into other physicians for no particular reason. We have some specialists saying, well, you primary care doctors can't be prescribing that. Well, we're the ones who are in the trenches. We are the front line. An awful lot of patients can't get a hold of a specialist if their life depended on it. So we're the ones whose phone number is being given out by our answering service. So if I can't choose to use budesonide or dexamethasone or azithromycin or remdesivir or hydroxychloroquine, how are we going to learn and help our patients? Since when did patients get marginalized such that they don't get to have a say? I called a couple of pharmacists day before yesterday and said, if I write for hydroxychloroquine prescriptions for my patients, will you fill them? And they said, probably not. They said, we don't have to, and we would just feel that this might be setting a bad precedent. And I said, you've never done this to me before. If I wrote a prescription, as long as there was a drug that had been identified by the FDA as safe and it was off-label, you were prescribing. And the pharmacist just basically showed me, well, this is the world in which we live. And I think it's absolutely true.
You know, and it's amazing, actually, Scott. One of the things that scared me to death, and we reported on the HighWire, is that the PrEP Act was passed in order to handle this epidemic. It's going to protect any vaccine maker on a level that not even the 1986 Vaccine Compensation Act protects the vaccine makers. I've been joking that under the PrEP Act, a doctor could basically shoot you and say, hey, we were just trying a new approach, and they would be protected by the PrEP Act, which has a robust protections under an emergency guideline situation, given that there's a pandemic, given that there aren't known tools, that doctors, you know, should be protected to be able to try whatever they think might work in an effort for, you know, doctors worldwide, but especially the United States of America, to maybe stumble upon or use some real research to get to a potential cure. I find, you know, yet now I find myself saying, but wait a minute, this would be the benefit of the PrEP Act right now, isn't it? Isn't this why, you know, when, you know, President Obama, you know, put this into the Affordable Care Act, it was a part of this whole idea that should we ever find ourselves in extreme circumstances, doctors need to be free to make choices. So, you know, at one moment I was only seeing the negative, now I'm seeing the positive, and pharmacies are keeping us from getting the benefits of what the PrEP Act was there for.
And one of the real underlying problems here is that if you look at where we're allowing some of these possible important medications to be used on COVID-19 patients, it's basically being in the hospital. Well, once you get in the hospital, you have basically another phase of disease. You are not in that mild to moderate group. You are now in that moderate to severe group. Where are we going to find if utilizing a drug early on would help keep a person from the hospital, other than in the outpatient setting? What we've done is we've said, okay, hydroxychloroquine doesn't seem to have much benefit if it's used late in the game. But what we're hearing from many doctors around the world is earlier in the game, before a patient is hospitalized, this is where it seems to have real value. But we're saying, no, I shouldn't say we, I should say some of our bureaucrats are saying, no, we're not going to let you do any of those kinds of things. We're going to wait till the patient either gets well on their own or they get sick enough where they have to come to the hospital. And at that point in time, we'll bring them into the hospital, we'll be in charge. And that's maybe when we'll try hydroxychloroquine. And we are already aware of the fact that that does not appear to be the best time to use the drug. So it's an absolute catch-22, and it makes no sense.
Scott Jensen wins, everybody. He won. It's a great step forward for mankind, a step back to where science used to be. You know, as I was sitting listening to that incredible interview with such a brilliant American citizen warrior truth speaker, I thought, how many things he just said could get us kicked off of the internet right now? Scott Jensen wins, everybody. He won. It's a great step forward for mankind, a step back to where science used to be. You know, as I was sitting listening to that incredible interview with such a brilliant American citizen warrior truth speaker, I thought how many things he just said could get us kicked off of the internet right now. Do you realize what an opportunity social media had here? That, you know, Mark Zuckerberg and these owners of Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, you know, this is what the dream was supposed to be, you guys, that there was going to be a platform that should there one time be a need, like a potential worldwide epidemic or pandemic, that the media might be influenced by pharma and unable to speak the truth, but that doctors could reach out through this great platform and find each other around the world, tapping into their computers from their own hospital saying, I'm using hydroxychloroquine, or I'm using this asthma drug. Here's the success rate. Try this out. Sharing. In fact, why didn't YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or any of these sit down and let's have a global forum? Let's have an open forum to the world to truly have an open discussion to save lives around the world. Because we at Facebook, we at YouTube really care about, we know that it's communication, which is what we cared about, is how we move into the future. Instead, communication companies are censoring people like Dr. Senator Scott Jensen. What a sad, sad choice, Mark Zuckerberg and whatever the rest of your names are that run these monolithic, supposed communication companies. Instead, you're just muzzling companies. You could have made a difference in the world. You could have decided to listen to the doctors that are actually treating patients instead of the bureaucratic pencil pushers that are telling them what to do. Isn't that what Facebook once dreamed it could be? Here is just a piece of that video that is going viral around the world.
I continue to lead a large 8,000 patient practice through the front lines of this COVID-19 pandemic. Yesterday, my colleagues were on Capitol Hill, and these people, I felt the connection so deeply because they are people who love and care for patients just like I do. And they came out and they spoke about information that has been hidden from the public, information that I've had to go underground to find. I'm not a political person. I just want to heal people. I want to empower people. I want you to be able to take care of yourselves and live a life the highest potential you ever can possibly achieve. And these doctors have information. I am so blessed to say that I have access to the information. I know there was a lot on my feed about how the initial YouTube video was taken down. And that is, I think, the biggest thing that I want to beg all of you that are listening to this video, and please share it. Why are these doctors being censored on YouTube? Who is doing that? Why? What is their agenda? Why do we have to see more people die? If you saw that woman with her heart on her sleeve, she was begging the American people, saying she didn't care what happened to her, that the information has to be released. And that predominantly, the biggest point that was given on this, during this newscast or press conference, was that hydroxychloroquine, which has been all over the place during this pandemic, as soon as it started gaining momentum, whether it was political reasons or because of the V word and funding of a study that was shady, and I've discussed this on this live before, they confirmed that. Those studies, and some of which were retracted from major journals, who is allowing that to be published in the first place? Using hydroxychloroquine at 4 times the dose and then being able to say that it caused cardiac arrhythmias. Anything we use at 4 times the recommended dose is going to do that. But one of the things that blew me away the most yesterday was that there's a preventive dose. There's a preventive dose, it's incredibly low. It's a 200 milligram tablet of this pill twice a week. There's no risk, they've done studies. This drug has been out for 65 years. So why are we not giving that to our frontline workers? Why are we not giving that to our teachers? Why are we not giving that to the immunocompromised? This drug is also available over the counter in other countries. You can get it over the counter. And they blocked my prescription because CVS Pharmacy told me I can't prescribe that for my patients that aren't feeling well. So I didn't stop because I don't stop. That's why I'm sitting here. I don't stop.
Why would you shut down 12 doctors talking about a pharmaceutical product that is being used and been in over 65 studies around the world with a lot of success? The only studies we can find that Fauci and people are pointing to are so dangerous and poorly done and clearly appear to be using lethal doses to make their point. But when real doctors use a really logical dosage of hydroxychloroquine, usually in combination with azithromycin and zinc or just zinc, there seems to be real success. And that's one of the things that Tony Fauci keeps alluding to, right? Well, I mean, hydroxychloroquine has got to work on its own, or I don't trust it. Well, no. I mean, there's a protocol. There's things that multiple compounds together can actually work together. So the trial shouldn't be just hydroxychloroquine by itself, because not a single doctor has said that's all I'm doing. They're saying very specifically hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, and zinc being used together. But why would you gun for it? Why at a time where people are dying is Facebook only allowing you to do nothing? Is YouTube only allowing you to do nothing? Why is Tony Fauci demanding that you do nothing at a time where we have the PrEP Act saying, try some things? People are dying. If your patient's not looking good, take a shot. You know, look around the world. There's a lot of people talking about this. Instead, they want it dead. They want it dead in the water. It is so obvious. Tony Fauci is giving every forgiveness to every problem in the vaccine trials right now. Oh, I don't care about the people that got sick. I'm not really worried about its efficacy. I don't really care. But boy, when it comes to hydroxychloroquine, I want triple, double-blind, placebo groups by the tens of thousands before I'm ever going to approve this thing. Well, when we were trying to think what would really be behind it, I've been saying, I'm telling you, I think it's the vaccine. Folks, I think they're trying to force a vaccine on all of us, which open up all the future vaccines that they want to pour into us without our choice. We actually saw the ACIP meetings, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. This is the CDC group that works at voting to add vaccines to the schedule. They had an emergency meeting last week right before our show went live. Here's just a little part. Remember, you're just going to see a big slide. You're going to hear people talking because these meetings are extremely boring, and they've even gotten more boring now that everybody is simply zooming in from around the country. But I just want to point out one of the major discussions they had, and the meeting was all about the future COVID-19 vaccine. This is the part I want to focus on. What's really behind this? Why would they not want a treatment to work when all the doctors using a treatment seem to be having success? Look at this.
So there are other regulatory mechanisms for making vaccines available that do not involve licensure. And one of these, the one that is perhaps most pertinent to addressing the COVID-19 pandemic in the U.S. is the FDA's authority to grant emergency use authorization, or EUA.
EUA. I love it how they make up these things. We got to call EUA, EUA. But here's the point. They were meeting to talk about the emergency use authorization. Why? Well, because if Donald Trump is going to have warp speed, that means that and by the way, we are apparently spent $1 billion manufacturing the Moderna vaccine right now as we speak. I think another $1 billion is manufacturing Oxford's AstraZeneca vaccine before it's through safety trials. And even though the guy at Forbes wants you to take vaccines before they've ever been through a safety trial, you really can't do that unless the FDA allows emergency use, right? Now, this is something the CDC wants to be a part of. We want emergency use. So look at what the criteria is. The declaration by HHS Secretary of Emergency Situation leading to serious or life-threatening disease or condition, meaning HHS has to declare this is an emergency. There has to be evidence of an effectiveness for product intended to address emergency. In this case, the COVID-19 vaccine. And the EUA standard is it may be effective. Wow, that's impressive, isn't it? Oh, no, there's a chance it could be effective. That's all we need. That's all we need to go ahead and let people get it. There has to be known and potential benefits of the product that outweigh the known and potential risks of the product. The intended use, e.g., number of individuals to be treated, and risk uncertainties impact application of EWA effectiveness standard. But here's the big one. There can be no adequate, approved, and available alternative. No adequate and approved alternative. There can't be any other way to treat it in order for us to force this vaccine on you without proper long-term safety trials. I mean, am I doing my job here? This is what a reporter's supposed to do, right? What could possibly be the motivation for the head of our, health task force who happens to work at NIH where they own patents in the Moderna vaccine? Well, besides owning patents and besides the ability to make millions of dollars themselves, what would be the other potential, motivation, right? It's kind of like law. Lawyers got to come up with the motivation for the crime. Well, in this case, could it be that if we have a treatment like hydroxychloroquine that is showing anywhere between 60 to 99% success rate, even Ford Medical Center, one of the big research hospitals, looked at 6 hospitals, thousands of patients, said they had half the deaths in the group that got the hydroxychloroquine. So would you want to kill that study and just say, I don't accept Ford Medical Center because actually, if they're right, we can't use the emergency use for the vaccine? We dug a little deeper just in case you're saying, well, that was kind of vague. It was just the line. So what do they mean there can be no alternative? We looked up the FDA. They have the emergency use authorization of medical products and related authorities, guidance for industry and other stakeholders. We went and looked up, well, what would it mean to have no alternatives? Here is the exact definition. For FDA to issue an EWA, there must be no adequate, approved, and available alternative to the candidate product for diagnosing, preventing, or treating the disease or condition. Remember, people are using hydroxychloroquine in 200 milligram doses every other day or so that are frontline doctors, so they're using it as a preventative. We also remember that 2005 study, that really pesky study that by the NIH that Fauci knows about, that said that the hydroxychloroquine is not only appearing to be effective against SARS coronavirus, at stopping it and mitigating its effects, it also can be a preventative, be used as a preventative. So let's read the rest of this. So we know it does all of those things based on a study in 2005 by Fauci's own NIH. A potential alternative product may be considered unavailable if there are insufficient supplies. We don't have that problem of the approved alternative to fully meet the emergency need. A potential alternative product may be considered inadequate if, for example, there are contraindicating data for special circumstances or populations, e.g., children, immunocompromised individuals, or individuals with a drug allergy. If a dosage form of an approved product is inappropriate for use in a special population, a tablet for individuals who cannot swallow pills, for instance, or if the agent is or may be resistant to approved and available alternative products. I mean, look at that whole last part of this would be an argument against any vaccine usage at any time because everybody's different, right? There is no one-size-fits-all. Doctors can't give hydroxychloroquine or any drug for that matter. They can't give any of the drugs they're advertising on the TV to everybody because, as the side effects say in that long ticker tape, someone's going to die, someone's going to get heart disease, someone's going to have anal leakage. That's just the way it goes. That's how drugs work. So anyway, there you have it. I think they're gunning for any treatment, and believe me, that will be remdesivir. It doesn't matter what you call it, whether it's an asthma inhaler that somehow blocks the issues that are going on in the lungs. They cannot have a treatment because they have to force you into compliance with the vaccine, potentially before it's even proven safe. Everyone's searching for the vaccine unicorn, and as Moderna and AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson get closer and closer, are the frontline doctors going, woohoo, we found it, lasso that sucker and bring it home? You wouldn't think so if you heard one of the greatest vaccine proponents in the world saying this.
The ABC conducted a poll where they asked people, would you get a COVID-19 vaccine? About 2/3 said yes and 1/3 said no. I would have said no. I don't know whether I get it. I mean, it's a theoretical vaccine. Let me see what the data look like, then I'll tell you when I get the vaccine. And this was sort of handled by the press like, 1/3 of the public doesn't want to get the vaccine. I was surprised 2/3 of the public was willing to get it sight unseen. that they trusted the process.
Well, there you go. Dr. Paul Offit is like, are you kidding me? I wouldn't touch the thing with a 10-foot pole until I see it get through some very substantial safety studies. Remember, I've been telling you this for years. Can you imagine if we could just actually get Paul Offit to take the 10,000 vaccines he said anyone could survive? Vaccines are safe and effective, and someone could take 10,000 vaccines. Now we found just one that he's not willing to take. Ironic, shocking. It makes you wonder, where would he be if this vaccine was only for children? Maybe he had a different mindset. I don't know. I don't want to question him. I think, as I've said before, he probably means well. But before you think, we should label him as an anti-vaxxer, and you remember the entire concern, right, is that guys like Del Beach with his articles, right, they're going, this vaccine will never be successful because the anti-vaxxers are scaring everybody away. Really? I am? Did you happen to know that there's a letter now that has gone out by over 400 top physicians, nation's leading vaccine authorities, not just any physician, vaccine makers and scientists urge thorough review of safety and efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines, completed phase 3 trials, and transparent process necessary for public confidence, experts say. You would not believe this list. I mean, we're talking Dr. Peter Hotez amongst many world-renowned doctors now saying, hold on a second, okay? This idea that I keep hearing on the news where you're saying the first people that are going to get this probably in the fall are our frontline doctors because they need to be protected while they treat other people. So we may be giving this product to them before it's even finished with its phase 3 trial, which most likely won't even happen until later next year. You see what's happening? All of those frontline doctors that actually make vaccines, that actually know what's in the sausage because they've made sausage before, and now they know we're all watching through a microscope. Wow, I wonder what happens to Paul Offit when he takes his vaccine. I wonder how Peter Hotez is going to feel after he gets his vaccine. They're saying, I am not going to be that guinea pig. Outrageous. Well, there's been lots of articles about this, so it's not just me alone. It's not the anti-vaxxers anymore. It's pretty much anyone with a brain. Here's some of the headlines. This is Medscape, of all places. Scientists rely on unproven methods to create COVID-19 vaccine. Those coronavirus vaccines leading the race don't ditch the mask quite yet. That's Yahoo. It goes on to say, but when Americans line up for their immunizations, the vaccine they receive might not be what they expect. The popular notion of a vaccine, a shot in the arm that prevents diseases such as measles, polio, or shingles for years or a lifetime, may not actually apply. Under recently released federal guidelines, a COVID-19 vaccine can be authorized for use if it is safe and proves effective in as few as 50% of those who receive it. And effective doesn't necessarily mean stopping people from getting sick from COVID-19. It means minimizing its most serious symptoms, experts say. That's absolutely outrageous. We should anticipate the SARS-CoV-2 vaccine to be similar to the influenza vaccine, said Dr. Kathleen Newsill, director of the Center for Vaccine Development at the University of Maryland. That vaccine may or may not keep people from being infected with the virus? Wait, I thought that was the whole point. Now you're telling me it's going to be more like the flu? Remember headlines about the flu just last year, flu vaccine 10% effective? So we accept 10% effective for the flu. Now we've reduced the vaccine unicorn we were all dreaming about from being like this amazing specimen to truly, it is turning into a chihuahua right before our eyes. 50% effective. I mean, how do you get to herd immunity, right? And they're saying, oh, by the way, it won't even stop transmission. Do you see what is happening here? Do you see that we are shutting down our economy? Everybody's locking in their basements. They're wearing masks or goggles or whatever it is they want because those people are saying, we've just got to hide from this virus until the amazing vaccine unicorn is found. But now, if that vaccine unicorn cannot stop transmission, what are we doing here? Paul Offit had this to say about this brilliant vaccine unicorn.
Stat News publishing an interesting article this week says, in the public imagination, vaccines are often seen effectively as cure-alls, like inoculations against measles Rather than those vaccines, however, the COVID-19 vaccines in development may be more like those that protect against influenza, reducing the risk of contracting the disease and of experiencing severe symptoms should infection occur. So something that helps you but doesn't cure you, protect you.
Exactly right. So the protection may be short-lived and incomplete. By short-lived, I mean it may last for only a year or a couple years. And by incomplete, what I mean is that it would protect you against moderate to severe disease, but not a mild disease associated with reinfection, in which case you might still be shedding virus. So I think we need to, as we know more about these vaccines, we need to manage expectations so people can know what to expect when these vaccines roll off the assembly line.
Please manage our expectations. And by the way, it isn't going to be anti-vaxxers that are going to make people not want to get this vaccine, because as you just pointed out, remember, this has a 0.26% death rate, a tiny 0.25% of very, very sick individuals, mostly in nursing homes, who are at risk. For the rest of us, we don't even have symptoms. I mean, this is exemplified. I'm not making this up. How many people are having to be tested to be told, my God, you have this virus? In fact, asymptomatic carriers are running all over the planet, and they're saying it may just reduce your symptoms. Reduce my symptoms? You mean below zero? None at all? Asymptomatic? How do you reduce symptoms below nothing at all? Because that's what most of us are experiencing. I mean, this is really happening, folks. These are really the discussions happening by doctors. But even if they could reduce, your non-existent symptoms to like even, less than, I don't know how that's possible. The point is it can't stop transmission, or it may not be able to stop transmission. And so when we start worrying about Bill Gates wants to give it to 7.5 billion people, you had the lawyers board, what do you call it? The law review up in New York saying we want to force vaccination law over all of New York. Well, if the product doesn't stop transmission, what would be the point? And to that point, we've got to ask ourselves, is there a point? This is what Dershowitz in the debate with Robert Kennedy Jr. had to say, discussing, well, if the vaccine can actually stop transmission, even though he was dreaming of forcing it on people, and those were his original statements. Look what he says if this ends up being the chihuahua they're now describing.
The AstraZeneca vaccine, the Oxford vaccine, which is the other leader, when they gave it to monkeys, the monkeys continued to transmit the disease. And Bill Gates and Fauci have been going on TV saying, we may get a vaccine that protects you, but you may still be transmitting it. So why are you going to lock that guy up in a house? Look, and let all people out who are now asymptomatic carriers because they got Gates' vaccine.
Let me agree with you, first of all. If they develop a vaccine that only prevents you from getting it, but doesn't prevent you from transmitting it, I would not be in favor of compelling that vaccine. And I think the Supreme Court would not accept that as a rationale.
All right, as people start to wake up, and those of you that have been terrified of a forced vaccination program, just recognize that even vaccine makers around the world hate that idea right now, because this thing is really turning into a disaster. And it's going to become a bigger and bigger media disaster, with all of the media agencies that told us to destroy our economy. That how could you be so selfish to want to keep your job or your house or be able to feed your children, when what we have to do is lock down until the vaccine comes and saves us. Well, mainstream media is losing big time. They're the big time losers of the week, because when you were polled, this is what we've just discovered. Yahoo News, YouGov, coronavirus poll, number of Americans who plan to get vaccinated falls to 42%, a new low. It goes on to say, for a COVID-19 vaccine to actually stop the pandemic, scientists estimate that at least 60% of the population, and probably more like 75 or 80%, would need to be vaccinated, a number that depends on many factors, including the efficacy of the vaccine, which they're going to accept at 50%, which means none of these numbers will get there itself, and how widely the virus has already spread. With that in mind, Yahoo News and YouGov have been polling the American people for the past few months. If and when a coronavirus vaccine becomes available, will you get vaccinated? The trend lines have become or have been discouraging. I think Now the latest Yahoo News YouGov poll conducted July 28 to 30 shows that just 42% of Americans plan to get vaccinated for COVID-19, the smallest share to date. Now, the outlook for universal vaccination is clouded by political considerations from both sides. This is really interesting. Skepticism about medical authority and expertise more common among Trump supporters. They don't trust the medical authority like Fauci. And suspicions, mostly among Democrats, that the administration is cutting corners on safety to rush a vaccine into production before the election with the warp speed has got all sides now questioning this vaccine. It's a very interesting graph if you pull this up. And not that this should be political, but you can see Republicans are down to 37%. Democrats, I think everybody's at 42. Democrats have slid what looks like 15 points from 61 down to 55, which is really shocking since that's who's been pushing this vaccine agenda. Now remember, they're going to try and say this is my fault. And though I do get a little warm and fuzzy, just the idea that I have that much power over the world, it's insane. And now that there's 400 doctors that make vaccines speaking out against rushing this vaccine, I find myself in really strange company. But watch as Peter Hotez will continue to report, you better be worried about those anti-vaxxers because they're the ones that are going to stop you vaccinating. No, Peter, we saw you sign the letter to protect your own butt, okay? We all saw it. You put it in ink. You guys are the ones that are now afraid of the Chihuahua corn. Nobody rushing this coronavirus vaccine to market is going to be liable. Do you think they're not aware of that? Do you think they're, happy that they're covered by liability protection? Here comes the shocking statement of the week. You ready for this? You saw it here first at the HighWire. This is Globe and Mail. AstraZeneca to be exempt from coronavirus vaccine liability claims in most countries. Yeah, like we always do. Listen to what they say. This is a unique situation where we as a company simply cannot take the risk if in 4 years the vaccine is showing side effects. Rudd Dauber, a member of Astra's senior executive team. We cannot take the risk to have liability should this vaccine prove to cause long-term problems 4 years from now. You point me to the safety trial that will prove to us it will be safe 4 years from now. How do you do that in 6 months? How do you do a 6-month trial and figure out what something's going to do 4 years from now? You see, I'm not making this up when I say there are long-term issues with every vaccine. Autoimmune diseases that occur, and AstraZeneca just said you better protect us from liability because you're the idiots forcing us to do this quickly. We should have had at least a 4-year safety review, and if we can't have that, it's your problem when you all get sick or die. You can't make this stuff up, folks. This is absolutely crazy. All right, let's move on. Let's get to the end of this show. Well, let's talk about Sweden then. Here is the update. Remember, everyone say, well, I don't know. Trump said Sweden's going herd. It's crazy. It's crazy. This new and novel approach, dangerous. Look at the headlines now, folks. Delaying herd immunity is costing. Oh, this is a different article. Before we get into Sweden, this is what sets it up. Let's go back. Do we have that article? Delaying herd immunity is costing lives. This is a really outrageous article by a Dr. Martin Kulldorff. I believe he's from Harvard. Is that right? Now remember, is this an anti-vaxxer or is this a doctor? Because of its virulence, widespread, and the many asymptomatic cases it causes, COVID-19 cannot be contained in the long run. And so all countries will eventually reach herd immunity. To think otherwise is naive and dangerous. What have I been saying on this show for the last 5 months? Exactly this. I am being deplatformed for what now a Harvard doctor is telling you in an article. You cannot avoid herd immunity. Herd immunity is the only way forward. And any idiot that is on CNN or any news anchor that will not use the word herd immunity is a moron. He goes on to say, general lockdown strategies can reduce transmission and death counts in the short term, but this strategy cannot be considered successful until lockdowns are removed without the disease resurging. There it is. The choice we face is stark. One option is to maintain a general lockdown for an unknown amount of time until herd immunity is reached through a future vaccine, which we're now finding out it probably won't be able to do, or until there's a safe and effective treatment, which we are blocking right now because we love the vaccine. This must be weighed against the detrimental effects that lockdowns have on other health outcomes. Considering these numbers, people above 60, where have I heard this before? People above 60 must be better protected, while restrictions should be loosened on those below 50. Older people who are vulnerable should stay at home. Food should be delivered and they should receive no visitors. Geez, wow, deja vu. Nursing homes should be isolated together with some of the staff until other staff who have acquired immunity can take over. Wow, brilliant. Only discussed on the HighWire like 4 months ago. Younger people should go back to work and school without older coworkers and teachers at their sides. It only makes perfect sense. The sense the HighWire has been given to you from the beginning. And as I said, it would really suck if we had no way to prove that this would work to you, because the entire world has gone crazy and decided to hide from a virus for the first time in history. But Sweden didn't hide. And we talked about, well, they had higher rates of death than their neighbors, but not higher than America or Spain or Italy or people that got hit hard. Here's the headlines in Sweden. Sweden COVID-19 death rate lower than Spain, Italy, and UK, despite never having lockdown. In Sweden, a different approach to coronavirus control, only the original approach every nation used for the last multi-centuries until this year. They went with the old approach. Sweden's very different approach to COVID-19. Let's let the virus run its course. Here it is. Even amidst the variation, Sweden stands out in its approach to COVID-19. The country's primary schools have remained open. Restaurants, too. Those congregating at the bars discouraged, and tables are set farther apart. Those who can are encouraged to work from home, but nightclubs can operate, so long as the manager ensures that people keep an arm's length from one another. Sweden's chief epidemiologist Anders Tegnell, who enjoys a sort of celebrity status in the country for his unflappable calm, says the strategy seems to be working. We might have reached a peak and we are on the plateau, he said at a briefing on April 15th. Well, there you have it. Do we have the graphs? Sweden is not seeing the second wave the rest of the world and everyone around them in Europe is. It's going down. Here's their daily new cases. And look at deaths going down even more. Even with the new cases, deaths are falling through the floor. Exactly. Let me be clear. Exactly what has happened with every coronavirus and every flu, essentially, since the dawn of man. Yes, some are more virulent and dangerous than others. And this is probably a stronger than usual flu or cold. But the only way to get through it is at some point, you've got to see it go down. You've got to reach herd immunity, as not Del Beatty's saying, but a Harvard scientist and doctor is telling you. So is Knut Witkowski and virtually every scientist we presented on this show. But I want to remind you and show you once again this 4-minute video because it says it all. Australia right now is seeing, a skyrocketing rate of cases. We are seeing everywhere we open in America, it's going back up. And they're saying, what happened? I don't understand. Why didn't the masking work? Why didn't the lockdowns work? Because they did, essentially. You were just hiding. It was waiting for you. It was still going to be there. Just as the article said by the doctor from Harvard, the lockdowns can only said to have worked once you can walk freely into the street and not see a resurgence. We can't do that because the only thing we've stalled is herd immunity. No one could say it better than this 4 minutes of one of the top Swedish epidemiologists talking about their approach versus Australia's. Back in April. Take a look at this.
You've been a strong critic of the idea of lockdowns. Sweden has avoided the sort of lockdowns that we're seeing here in Australia. Tell us your thoughts. Are lockdowns the correct way to go?
You introduced me by saying that I would say that you got it all wrong. I don't think you got it all wrong, but you painted yourself into a corner, and I'm watching with interest how you and 100 other countries will climb out of the lockdown. Because I don't think any government that I know gave a minute's thought about how they would get out of the different lockdowns that are installed. Take a school closure, for example. If you close the schools, when are you going to open them? What's the criteria? I don't think anyone thought about that when the closure was decided on.
Now, Johan, you said that you think the results are going to be similar across most countries. regardless of the
Yes.
approach they've taken. Can you take us through that?
Seeing is a tsunami of a rather mild infection spreading around the globe. And I think there's very little chance to stop it by any measure we take. Most people will become infected by this, and most people won't even notice. We have data now from Sweden that shows that between 98 and 99% of the cases have had a very mild infection or didn't even realize they were infected.
Wow.
So we have this spread of this mild disease around the globe, and most of it is happening where we don't see it. It's among people that don't get very sick, spread it to someone else who doesn't get very sick. And what we're looking at is a thin layer at the top of people who do develop disease, an even thinner layer of people that go into intensive care, and an even thinner layer of people who die. But the real outbreak is happening where we don't see it.
Now, here in Australia, we've done an incredibly good job suppressing it. I'm wondering, do you think we have done too good a job? Is it possible to do too good a job suppressing it in the early stages, such that then you don't ever wind up being able to take the foot off the brake, as it were, on your restrictions?
But you make it succeed, and New Zealand may also succeed. But I've been asking myself, when New Zealand or Australia has stamped out every case in the country, what do you do for the next 30 years? Will you close your borders completely, quarantine for everyone who's going to Australia or New Zealand? Because the disease will be out there. I don't know how you're going to handle that, but that's your problem.
But you think that at the end of the day, they're all pretty much going to end up with the same fatalities, the same results, the same deaths, regardless of what measures they took. Explain that.
Basically, I think that's the same. Because like I said, the real epidemic is invisible, and it's going on all the time around us. The other thing with the lockdown is when you open it, you will have more cases. So the countries who pride themselves in having few deaths now will get these deaths when they start lifting the lockdown.
Now, you mentioned that the overwhelming majority of people who get this disease have no symptoms or very minimal symptoms. Do we even know the real fatality rate of coronavirus? And what is it?
Well, it's around 0.1%.
We were told it was 3% initially, 2%. Are you saying now if it's 0.1, that's pretty much the same fatality rate as the regular flu, isn't it?
I think it's a bit higher, actually. I had said before in Sweden that this is like a severe influenza. I don't think that's completely true. It will be a bit more severe than influenza, but not maybe double, but not tenfold. Sorry, yes?
Sorry, Professor, you've said the best policy, the correct policy would simply be to protect the old and the frail. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's the Swedish model has sort of two pillars. One is only use measures that are evidence-based, and there are two that are evidence-based. And one is washing hands is good. We've known that for 150 years, since Semmelweis in Austria a long time ago. The other is social distancing. If you don't get too close to other people, they won't infect you. And the third may be trust people. People are not stupid. If you tell them what's good for them, they will do what you say. You don't need this soldiers in the street and police, and it's unnecessary.
I have a feeling Sweden is going to have a population explosion over the next year or so. But look at that prediction, right? I just want to show you all the way back in April, because they were being ridiculed, right? Well, your death rate's higher than everybody else. But they're trying to say, yeah, but we are on the verge of herd immunity. We are not going to have to deal with this months down the road like the rest of you. So get to the end of the outbreak, and then let's all tally up and see who had more deaths. And what he's saying, they're going to die. Those that are going to die from this are going to die. Those that are going to catch it are going to have to catch it. It's just the way of the world. It's the way it's always been. He's not a visionary. He's not a psychic. He is a historian of science. He's somebody that has read all of his textbooks and knows we're going to deal with this the way we always have. Just because the WHO decided to create an opportunity out of a virus and try and sell a vaccine, so change the way we've ever approached this before, doesn't mean Sweden has to. And by the way, where are they at right now with their plummeting lines? They're saying things like, masks? We don't see a need for masks. We see no point in wearing a face mask. Sweden's top virus expert says as he touts the country's improving COVID numbers. Meanwhile, one of the countries that was, that was being pointed to as having done really well was Japan. Somewhere they said, people have been saying to me, well, Japan wears the masks, and see, it does work. I mean, Japan really didn't see an outbreak. Well, now look at Japan's graphs. Japan braces for looming second wave amid dramatic spike in COVID-19 cases. And there's what it looks like. They're now going up and up and up and up, like cities that are trying to open here in America. It's just obvious. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. This is just obvious. This is science. It's viruses and bacteria. This is the way they work. I'm not been trying to recreate the wheel here at the HighWire. I'm just saying, if you're gonna get it anyway, why did you destroy your country and your businesses for a year and a half and devastate your economy for no reason? Yes, lock down the elderly, definitely. And look, if you're in that group, I'm not going to say it's mandatory. If you're over the age of 65 and you aren't concerned about the 0.26% death rate in your population, fine, run around. It's a free country. But this idea that we're going to hide from this is ludicrous. It was even more ludicrous, and talk about prophetic. He was talking to Australia in that video, right? Look at Australia's numbers now. They had knocked it down to 0. They were so proud. Could we have done too good a job, he was asking in that piece? Australia and New Zealand are crushing COVID-19. Will the reopening strategies work for other countries? Nope. Let's just see the graphs. I know people have said, enough, Del, we get the point. Where's the graphs for Australia? I want to show it. There we go. Here you are. Here's what it did. Locking the heck out of Australia has resulted in this. They're terrified. They shouldn't be. It's a bad cold, folks. Yes, those that are really, really sick are going to have a problem with this. Here's your daily deaths going up. So Australia, in all of its efforts to lock down, ran into the problem that they were seeing in Sweden. I think you should be commended for knocking COVID-19 down to 0. My only question is, how are you going to open for the next 30 years? And today we saw that all of the people that are making the vaccine and built the company to create the vaccine are jumping ship and cashing in. 400 vaccinologists and vaccine makers around the world have signed on to a letter saying they don't want to see this vaccine rushed onto the market. Most are saying there's no way they even want to see it anywhere near people until the middle of 2021, which at that point, these measures will have destroyed our economy, and we might as well be cavemen again, living in caves and heating ourselves over a fire because no one's going to be able to afford their energy. You won't have food on the table. We certainly won't have people working or manufacturing food or lumber or any of the things we need. That's where we're going. And while Sweden is showing the light forward, saying, look over here, folks, only nation right now that doesn't appear to be suffering from a second wave because we let this thing run its course, Tony Fauci wants to triple down. Not just on masks, it just keeps getting better. Take a look at this.
If you really want perfect protection of your mucosal surfaces, just for your audience, Jen, as you very well know, you have mucosa in the nose, mucosa in the mouth, but you also have mucosa in the eye. And that's one of the things that, theoretically, you should protect all the mucosal surfaces. So if you have goggles or an eye shield, you should use it. I mean, it's not universally recommended, but if you really want to be complete, you should probably use it if you can.
I should use it, but you're not using it. In fact, we looked up Tony Fauci in goggles online. You won't find a single photo anywhere of him wearing goggles. At what point are you going to recognize this isn't about your health? It certainly isn't about his health. How about we do what the monkey does instead of what the monkey says? Because that's what's going on here. And I know people are saying, and we all said it, right? My God. Is this where we're going? Is really everybody going to be wearing goggles now? Is there going to be like a Texas goggle mandate? Is that what's going to happen? Oh, please, no. And I think a lot of people are saying, I hope, I pray, as I try and figure out what's going on in my country and how quickly we'll turn in our neighbor for not wearing a mask. Please, God, don't let me see my neighbors start wearing masks or start wearing goggles or I'm going to lose all hope. But I have a little bit different spin on this. The truth is Tony's right. He's right. And he just verified something that I've reported on, and I'm currently in Twitter jail because I said it. masks don't work. They don't work by themselves. They can't work because it's not, as you're pointing out, and he well knows because he won't wear it himself, it's not covering all of your mucosal areas. This is the point I've been making. You're breathing, it's coming out, but you're touching it all the time. If you touched your underwear this much and rub your eyes, you'd be having gingivitis, like all sorts of problems, what do you call it, conjunctivitis all over your eyes. You can't leave this open and cover this. It doesn't get you there. My whole point is telling people who are over the age of 65 that maybe have COPD or heart disease that masks protect you is dangerous. Tony Fauci has been putting people's lives at risk, not me. Not me saying the mask doesn't work. The people telling you you were safe wearing one. Now all of those elderly people that had pre-existing conditions, like the famous teacher in Arizona, can recognize, oh my God, Tony knew the whole time that if I should have been, my spouse or wife should have been wearing goggles, she would have lived. Well, yeah, duh. Masks don't do it, because if they did, people that work with viruses wouldn't be wearing this. Do we have a picture? Here we go. People who work with viruses for a living don't even wear, that's not even a hazmat suit. It's a reverse pressure suit so that the air can only move out of the suit, not in. That is what you wear when you are truly trying to stop from being in contact with a virus. So no, I wasn't lying when I said masks don't work. They're not going to protect you enough. Please be careful. Fauci is lying to you. Now he's admitting he's been lying to you. But here's what it comes down to. Are we going to put on, reverse pressure hazmat suits, every one of us? Is that the future of the United States of America? Because that is the only way we can avoid reaching herd immunity. It's the only way we avoid ever getting infected for the rest of our lives. Say goodbye to the oxygen. Say goodbye to your hike up the mountain. Say goodbye to your rafting, your bicycling, your skydiving, or whatever exciting thing you like to do. Say goodbye to swimming at the beach. This boy in the bubble future is your only way forward. So don't yell at me about a mask. Don't yell at me about goggles. If I don't see you in a reverse pressure hazmat suit, you're only lying to yourself. And we don't believe in lying here at the HighWire. This is a production by our nonprofit, the Informed Consent Action Network. If you want more investigations, more hard-hitting news, if you want the truth, go to ICanDecide.org and donate now.